Hello, everyone. Welcome to Big Bad Online. This is our panel on project management for tabletop RPG publishing. Today, we're going to be talking about the work of making games and what happens behind the scenes, why it's important, why it's sometimes painful, and how you might get into doing it yourself. My name is Steve Seghetti, and I'll be the moderator today for our panel of project management pros. We're going to start with some introductions, and then we're going to dig into the topic, but we're happy to answer questions from the stream, so please let us know what you have on your minds. Friends, please introduce yourselves to our viewers and tell us a little something about the games and companies you've worked with. Sophie, you want to start?
Sure. So my name is Sophie Lagasse. I use she and her as my pronouns. And I do project, until like 2 weeks ago, I did project management for Evil Hat. Now I'm still doing project management, but it's specifically for digital projects like putting things on Roll20 and Foundry and so forth. And in my professional life, I was a project manager for environmental and civil engineering projects. I am an engineer. I think Jenn is next.
Hi, I'm Jenn Martin. I use she, her pronouns. Currently, I work as the production manager for Bully Pulpit Games. I've also done a bunch of project management in my sort of day job life, and I work in a construction department at a community college.
I'm Eloy Lasanta, he, him pronouns, and I am the owner of Third Eye Games, co-owner of New Agenda Publishing. I do some project management here and there, a lot of figuring out what's going to be next in the timeline and the pipeline, I guess is the word. Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of project management. I don't know if I'm good at it, but I do it. So I know how to get the job done. So I'm happy to have the conversation.
I think that's the challenge. Right? That's the challenge we're all facing. One thing that comes up for me, and I should go on to say that I'm the managing director for Bully Pulpit Games. So Jenn and I work together, and I've worked on projects like this for a long time. And one of the reasons why we brought her on board is because I've never felt like I was good at it. We've always made it work. But there's also some variations in how people describe the concept of project management. In Jenn's case, she's our production manager, which is a little different than a project manager, and it sort of involves bits and pieces of both. Have you all found the same sort of confusion or conflation of jobs? How do you usually describe the role of a PM in your work?
I think there's a big difference between product in project management at the cycle stage. You can manage several projects and it sort of becomes like production. The more you have different things that start and stop, and it evens out your different tasks. But a project that has a definite beginning, middle, and oh my God, thank you. So Jenn is probably always on a beginning and an end and a middle at the same time.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Nope.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, I guess I would probably describe a lot of what I do as more product management. I'm like Steve, where I brought in another person. I brought in Phil Vecchione, who is a good friend of mine, amazing project manager, like overseer. So, he comes in and says, hey, Eloy, we have these 5-6 projects and they're all ongoing. And here are the different stages and here's all the stuff. And I'm like, that's awesome. So then I get in there and I start, picking stuff off and making sure that things get done. Again, because I'm pretty sure I was really bad at doing it. I'm always the kind of person who does stuff because I feel like doing it. And that's really bad for project management because you need to do it to a deadline. and I'm bad at that. So Jenn, I'm done.
Yeah, what I was going to say is one trap that I have previously fallen into that I will not fall into again is that, people define project manager differently. And it's really important to make sure you're on the same page as a freelancer, as the person who's employing you, That way down the line, you don't have some expectations of that you are or aren't doing something, and then they have differing expectations, and it becomes a problem.
Well, and I think too, a lot of that, the terms that are used in the gaming industry, and I think that might be the weird thing here, is that when we say project manager, to me that means one thing, and to other people that might mean different things. But in the game industry, the product manager is usually called the developer. Whereas the project manager is the person over the developer, making sure the stuff gets done to a deadline. So, I mean, that even might just be a way to just circumvent any kind of confusion of terms, because we do technically use different terms in the tabletop RPG industry as far as I've, interacted with many companies.
Especially as the scale changes, right? If you work for a larger company like Paizo or Wizard of the Coast, then certainly those roles are all very well defined. But if you're, a 1 or 2 or 3 person team, then you're all wearing a bunch of different hats, and so it could be very confusing.
Yeah.
So project management is a very different thing than writing and design, and I think we've all done bits and pieces of all of those things. How did you find yourself in this role of doing project management? How did it fall to you? Or how did you rush in and grab it because you love it so much?
I got in because I've been a gamer for years, well, decades, and I was a fan and a super fan, and got into volunteering for conventions and becoming staff and writing on my blog. And eventually I knew enough people, and I had enough of a body of written work online for things I had shared on my blog that it became a portfolio. And I approached Evil Hat. At the time, I had an idea for doing something based on Fate Accelerated, which had just been published. And they said, well, we don't want to do quite that, but it just happens that right now we have a project, and it was the War of Ashes, Fate of Agaptus book, which probably nobody knows. But imagine the premise is very much Homer's Odyssey, and it's played by Muppets, right? It's bloody and dangerous, but it's Muppets. And I just written a little freebie. Here's how to play Muppets with Fate Accelerated. So I had the perfect timing that time, and since I was doing well as a writer, I was on time. The book was on a good schedule, and my project management skills were helping for that. So that eventually, when Sean Nittner had too many projects to manage, he asked me if I was interested in managing some for Evil Hat.
So you got recruited by an overloaded project management.
I think that's a frequent.
Yeah, it happened to me too.
Yeah. Oh, the number one rule of project management: give your caffeinated beverage of choice.
Well, it's interesting. I kind of was exactly the opposite. Whereas, you were kind of recruited because you had a portfolio and a body of work. I am the type of person who doesn't know how to take baby steps. I'm like, yeah, I can kind of write. Yeah. Hey, let's start a whole brand new company and create like 7 different game lines. Let's do that. So it's almost, my learning has been very much on the job, and as a necessity to what it is that I like to do, which is just kind of be overly creative and try and come up with too many things, to the point where if I had no project management, I'd have 20 incomplete things as opposed to the 5 complete things with some things I'm currently working on, that sort of thing. Like it becomes necessary to create some level of organization especially when you start hiring on other people, and then you'd have to organize contracts and all kinds. I mean, so there's a lot to go into even just that part. But even if you're just talking about from the production, the writing, and the putting it together kind of stuff, and not even the admin stuff, the project management, I mean, that's kind of the ball game. Like, that's why I've had conversations with people at conventions, and they're like, yeah, I've been working on my game for 10 years, and it's just like, why don't you have somebody who says, okay, that I think 9 years was the cutoff. Like, I think you're done now. We should go ahead and get this book out. So it's like, it's just odd. Like, and that's why I like having a separate, full on project manager, because, if it was up to me, stuff could go on forever. But I like having somebody be like, Eloy, this needs to be done. Okay. I got it.
I think that calls in some of the differences, right? There's a difference between project managing yourself and project managing a team of other people, having someone else project managing you in a way that is an outside cutoff.
Yeah.
Can you guys talk a little bit about your experiences with that? Like, when you have worked with a team, either managing them or had someone managing you, like, what are the positives and negatives there? The pain points. Jen, you want to tell us about that?
So I've done freelance contract work for Evil Hat, and one thing that they do that I like is on a project, the project manager will like send out an email on Monday morning, and it'll be to everybody who's on the project at that time. Sometimes people who are done, are left off or whatever, and it'll just be like, here's what here's our milestones. Email me back and tell me where you're at, and or whether or not you're still gonna be able to make your deadline. And even just seeing like other people, like in general, I hate reply alls, but on those emails, I like reply alls, because then like in this remote work world, it still feels like a team, and I like that.
Sophie, have you had some experience with that difference between yourself and a team?
Yeah, but since I started being managed, and then I managed others. But I think what Eloy is talking about is different. It's really more like you, Steve. It's managing your things that are going to make your company sink or swim. But yes, of course, since I work for Evil Hat, I got trained into the same system. And it's one of the reasons I enjoyed working for them as a writer initially. It was so well organized. I've been in professional engineering projects managed by others that weren't that well managed. So it was a very pleasant surprise. But you're also always managing yourself, right? Even if you're a freelancer, you have a project, it's your own. So within that framework, you still have to have your own tools, your own habits to manage things. And some of the habits can be very bad. And then you're relying very much on the external project manager to, drive you back with the herd of cats. But I think it makes your own work a lot easier if you have these habits of figuring out what Jen was talking about at the beginning. What is my scope, right? She was talking about the scope of a project manager, but any project, any agreement you make, any contract, you have to have clear communication to agree on what it is the client wants. In this case, the client is either your boss, your project manager, or a company, or sometimes it's yourself, and what you think you should be doing. And if you're on different tracks, you'll waste a lot of time at the very least. I've talked to professional writers that have a lot of experience, but I was talking about scope and making sure that I'm writing the piece that the company wanted, and they're like, "Oh, I just write what I feel like, and at the end, I see if I can edit it down to what they want." Well, you may write 20,000 words and get paid for 4,000.
Well, and honestly, the way that I look at a lot of this stuff is, project management is accountability. And that's what, again, that's why, because artists, if you go into tabletop RPGs because you love the craft and you loved gaming and you like, it's an art form to you, which is how I treat it. That means that you're flighty. When you're not inspired, it's much harder to write, those sorts of things. And it is useful to have, a deadline and have somebody breathing down your neck and, all of that stuff. That's why, I will take months to write a thing for my own company. But if I take on a contract with another company and they're like, well, we need it in like 3 weeks, I'm like, well, bam. I mean, it's done. There you go. Just because, you gave me a date and I'm definitely going to hit the date. So I feel like that's a lot of what project management is. And that is why it is hard to do project management for yourself. Because for me, I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. So if the thing isn't exactly right, I'll just keep working on it. And since I'm my own boss, it'll come out whenever I feel like it. And that's why it's hard to kind of be the project manager for your own projects. But I also feel like if you are in the tabletop RPG industry and you are able to work with as many different types of people as you can, I feel like that's going to be your key. Different people, different companies, I guess maybe is the different way to say it. Like, you might have a way of doing it. Take on a random freelance gig with a company and see how they do it. And then to get another. And then, I mean, obviously if you're good enough and you keep getting hired. But each one, like every company that I've worked for outside of my own, I have learned things that they have done. And I'm like, oh, that's a cool way that they did that and how they kind of kept on top of that. Let me try to implement that over here into my workflow. So, I mean, experience, is king, in the end. The more things that you've experienced, the better you'll be at anything. And in this case, that also applies to project management.
So let's get into some of the more specific tools and methodologies. And the first one I'm going to ask about is sort of a follow-on to what we've been talking about. When you're managing other people, when you're managing a team, and you're trying to get everybody moving forward on a schedule, you have a release date in mind, you have things that need to get done, but you have team members who are, as we described, artists who have their own flow and their own schedule. How do you make people meet those deadlines? How do you, particularly if you're not their boss, how do you encourage them to get on board? Have you all experienced anything along those lines? Jen, feel free to speak freely.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's been helpful to me is learning the specific styles of the people who I am managing, right? Because some people are really responsive and prefer email. Some people really want an instant message somewhere. Some people really love Google Docs, Steve, and some people don't, and I think also a thing that's been really helpful to me is realizing as a project manager, I need to use whatever management system is going to work for me rather than trying to jam my work into somebody else's system. So like, I really love Notion. I have a whole bunch of deadlines and tables and all sorts of stuff like that. A lot of people don't even know what Notion is, and that's fine. But if I'm going to be responsible for managing a thing, I need to be able to do it in a place where I can do it, right?
I'm going to say that you need to have tools for yourself, and you need to have communication and people skill for others. And it can be very difficult to crack the whip, because any project, if you have writers, sometimes system developers, editors, you have artists, you have art direction, you have layout, you have a lot of people who come in. We have this myth of the game designer, and except for a few, very few people, most, even the smallest, will have at least, an editor and an artist. And so if you have enough people on a project, some things are going to go wrong. We're going to have a pandemic. You have people will have health issues. They will lose their day job. There's also, there will be surprises, and the bigger, the longer the project, the more of these you'll get. And it can be very hard to say to I get it. We're not mad at you. But if we're going to make our window for the Kickstarter, we need to have this piece. If you can't do it, tell us now. But in the game world, there's actually very few real hard deadlines. Sometimes you want to make the Kickstarter window or the production window, especially if you produce overseas, or maybe you want to meet Gen Con. But other than that, we're more like Eloy, if you want to take another 6 months to do it, and so most of the time we're going to say, okay, well, we understand, we're going, but sometimes you just have to put your foot down. That's hard. To do that, you need to have tools. But the tools need to be appropriate to the project, right? There are some things like if you use Microsoft Project or, it may be appropriate for a bigger project or a bigger company. And if you're just working yourself on a project, maybe a checklist and a calendar are sufficient. I'm going to share my screen for just a few minutes to show some of the tabs on that I opened. Okay, share entire screen. Yes. So it goes from, I was saying, a checklist. This is I was producing. I am working on the module based on stretch goals for Thirsty Sword Lesbians, and it's me assembling it. So I just have a checklist. I mark progress. This one's almost complete. See, actually, I can cross that one off because I got it. So we're almost done with it. It needs review and release. So as I was going, I would put on my percent complete, and I had a sense of when I was going to have it done. Sometimes all I want is a short little Excel or Google. I can use a Gantt chart if I'm a project manager and I want to keep track of everybody's tasks. And there are templates that are free, either for Google Sheets or for Excel. Here, if you Google it, Excel template Gantt chart, you will get some of these where, as you fill in dates and names, it will propagate, and you'll be able to see if your project is staying on track or if it's stretching on surprisingly longer than you expected. And then there are there's Instagant, which we use at Evil Hat, and this is an old project. This is from the Fate Space Toolkit. So it goes from beginning to end, and you can see there's the little window in the lower corner shows me the beginning, and then I can move along the lines here to see different tasks, and we've split it up between phases: the creating your outline, writing the main part, the system development, the play test, which is always something that takes a lot of time, the editing. So tools appropriate to the project that you have at hand, they will help you, but don't try to use a big tool for a small project because you will lose it's like making maps for a game, right? You love your game, you make your maps, you spend hours on it, and when you get to the table, you don't really have an idea of what you're actually going to do with that map. That's the new GM syndrome. This is the same for project management. I spoke a long time. I apologize.
Thanks very much for sharing that. That was really interesting to see. I think a lot of people, we're getting some questions from chat about the specific tools and the specific methodologies, whether you use a waterfall methodology or agile project planning, whether or not there are, like Notion, Instagant, things like that. Can you say more about some of the tools you've tried and the challenges you've had? What I'm hearing is it's easier to use those tools for yourself and communicate as much as possible with other people rather than trying to make the whole team use some project management tool. Is that your experience? Are there other tools that have worked well for a whole team?
I'm not expecting everybody else to use, for example, Instagant. I share it with them. There's an ability to share the link that lets you see what's going on without being able to edit. And I think it's very good. We have that in our check-ins on a weekly basis. So you can see the progress, but the project manager is the one who actually uses it and edits it. To Jen's point earlier, people using all different tools. I think she was talking primarily about communication, and that is something that we try to respect, because people who are going to have a lot of difficulty, folding back into another method to communicate. So there's some people that like to have a short meeting, like 15 minutes, maybe every week. And that's their way of communicating. They won't answer email because they're not comfortable with it. There's some, as she was saying, that you can only reach on maybe direct messaging on Twitter and so forth. But for planning purposes, you have to have the tools you, the project manager, are comfortable with. And frankly, there's all sorts of methodologies, and they all kind of work. I've worked with people who use Basecamp or Trello or just Asana, which is for us the backbone behind Instagant, and so forth. And they all work. Use the tools that are comfortable for you. The important thing is to have a method that lets you see the project as it develops and be able to see in advance, we've taken an additional 6 weeks here. That means, I have to push these guys up, and this is not going to work because they already told me they're going to be traveling during that month, So it's whatever works. I don't evangelize based on one or the other.
Eloy, have you had any particular success with certain tools or certain methods?
We've tried a few different ones over at Third Eye Games. Trello is one that we tried, and it didn't really work out. We ended up just going to just a really awesome spreadsheet with drop downs and dates, and you can put everything in, and it was awesome. I feel like the biggest thing to say would be, every company is going to have their own kind of different project manager method. And if you're freelancing or if you're trying to work with that company, you need to be able to conform to what the company uses, and not yes, you want to have some leniency and whatnot, kind of like what Jen was saying, like, hey, some people might want a quick text message, or maybe they'll want to, it's just like, yeah, but if the company is large enough and is doing enough things, they don't have time to conform to, fine, let's send this one freelancer an email because it's the only way he'll answer, even though we do everything over here on Slack, so you definitely need to be able to conform to, what the company is doing. And, and obviously the amount of leniency you get with that is based on, how much you've worked with the company and, how much, I guess, not seniority or, how much reputation you've built up with the company. I have people who I work with, and they might fall off the map for like 2 months, but there's just such good writers, and it's okay because, you know, after 2 months they'll hit me back and they'll be like, hey, something happened and I'm ready to start again. And I go, yeah, I kind of assumed let's do it now instead of 2 months ago when I really wanted to do it, but let's do it now because they're such an asset that I don't want to lose them. And, you know, they're that good. But, you know, if you write mediocre stuff or you're brand new and you try to pull that same thing, well, then I'd never work with you again. So, you know, it's that sort of thing. Like, you know, you also need to kind of, you know where you are, you know, in the hierarchy of hiring, I guess is the word there. And also another thing to kind of touch on a question that Steve asked was how you deal with, you know, writers and stuff. I think the biggest tool that you have is whatever contract you have for your company. And, you know, if somebody falls off the face of the map and you don't want to give them that leniency, a lot of contracts have a kill fee. Like, you know, hey, you dropped off the face of the earth. You gave me your PayPal before. I already sent you whatever I owe you. I already hired somebody else to write your section now. And, you know, and it sucks to have to do that because the act of finding the right writers for a project is already so harrowing. So like the moment that if one of them drops off, you're like, oh God, like they were going to have the perfect voice for this section. Now I have to find somebody who's going to deliver as well as this person was going to. And that's hard to do. But that's also part of project management. But also that's more product management. Anyway, it's a whole thing.
I think definitely it speaks a bit to the scale of tabletop, right? Where we're mostly individuals or small companies, ranging up into larger companies in the work that you do as freelancers or whatever. And I think that flexibility becomes more and more the smaller the company is, right? Because you don't have the control to say, hey, look, I'm sorry, but you're never going to work in this industry again if you don't hit that deadline. Well, you don't have that power. Nobody does. So you have to be more flexible in order to make everything work. And I think as things get larger, things get more structured. The deadlines become more important because you're working with bigger companies or printers or whatever. So anyway, thanks. I think that's useful to hear. Someone in the chat asked about how to manage yourself when you are a project manager for the team, but also filling a role in that team. When you have work to do that maybe you're doing or not doing, but again, sort of comes back to that managing yourself thing as part of the overall project. Any suggestions, any advice?
I mean, I like it when I'm working on a project that I'm also project managing because I have a really good look at where my work fits in with the whole project, right? And so I can be sneaky and I can know like, oh, if I'm 3 days late, it's not actually a big deal because we're not going to have this until that, or, you know, whatever. Sophie's laughing. She knows. But yeah, I do feel like there's sort of more stakes if I'm project managing a thing that I'm working on, because I do know the sort of drop dead dates. And so I do feel like dates are more rigid when I'm working on it. But otherwise, it's just sort of keeping the two separate is helpful to me because, you know, writing is different than project managing. So.
And you need that separation, like, because if you're working on dates and like contracts and, you know, deadlines and where are we at with the printer and all of those things, you can't be worried about like, how much damage is this thing doing? You know, so it's like they are two very different things. A lot of the time, what I'll end up doing is just setting aside a couple of days or a day a week where I devote to making sure that the company and that the projects are all in line. And then, you know, the rest of the time I'm actually working on the projects. There's rarely anything that comes out of any of my companies that I didn't write something on, you know, because a lot of the time they're becoming a thing because I had an idea and I wrote a thing and then I hired other people to pile on that thing. But, you know, the thing is still, you know, at its root, an idea that I had. So yeah, so that's basically where I live. I live in the, you know, everything, you know, how do I work on being the project manager for something that I'm also writing? And it's hard, but you do have to separate it in your mind as different tasks. You can't you can't treat it like it's one job. You know, it's kind of like if you're in music, you know, the recording is different than the mixing, which is different than the mastering. Like, yes, all of those things combine to make a good song, but they are very different things in the music making process.
So I know that there are probably people out there who are interested in applying their skills, becoming project managers in gaming. This is their way into doing gaming, game development. Do you have any recommendations for how they might get started, for how they might present themselves to companies to get in on this work?
It's a good question. If having contacts was very useful for me, right? You get some credibility. They know some of the things you've done before. In my case, organizing conventions demonstrated that I could, in fact, manage a project, right? So, like a lot of freelancers seeking work, I feel like you almost have to give of yourself before you can ask, okay, can I take on a paid project? And I'm not sure how healthy or unhealthy that is, but since in my case I was doing it for love, you know, it wasn't onerous. But you can also look at some of the companies that publish multiple books a year, for example, and you can assume that they will probably have some project management involved, and see if you know or can connect with any of these people, and ask them if you can get some try out, you know, on a small project, maybe a PDF publishing of a stretch goal or something like that. Overworked project managers and product development lines will just be happy to have more people in there to work with. And on the project manager side, if, you know, you may discover yourself that you need help. So in my case, it's for all the skills involved, whether it's editing or project management, I keep track in my address book. I use tags, and I know that somebody's was very, very much on task, or, you know, that I want to work with them again, or that they might be able to help with a different type of work. So yeah, if you're an overworked project manager, keep track of the people who are on the ball and respond, deliver on time, deliver quality, you know.
Yeah, honestly, and most of the time, whenever anybody's asking a question of like, how do you get into this job?
Yeah.
You know, a lot of the time it's just, hey, you have to know the people who will get you into the job. But what I'll say is, you know, when anybody comes into tabletop RPGs, very few are coming in to be project managers. A lot of the time, everybody wants to be the person to write the next big thing, and they want to have their name in giant letters on the front of a book and all that stuff. Very few people come into RPGs to be in the background and helping those things come to fruition. So, but roles evolve, and you'll see that even some of the bigger, you know, writers and stuff, eventually they become project managers and developers and stuff like that, because it becomes less important for them to be out in the front all of the time. So, like, basically, everybody that I've met or that I've worked with has been through sharing different ideas that we've worked on. And eventually they'll say, I also edit. And I'll be like, hey, you also edit? Hold on. You know, it's like, you know, because sharing ideas, like, you know, I have a million ideas. So I don't, you know, it's kind of like asking, you know, how do you get somebody to publish your game? It's just like most companies have a million games that they like to publish, so they don't really need yours. Very few of the companies have project managers. So if you just come up to a small company and you're like, hey, do you have anybody helping you with your project management? I will give you 5-to-1 odds that they're going to be like, yeah, we would, yeah, come on in. Like, we would love your assistance, because again, what Steve said, a lot of it is like very small companies, only a handful of people. And a lot of them are just trying to cobble together all their creative ideas into something that looks remotely like a product. And they need somebody to help them manage it and get it all together. So, I mean, I would say, shoot your shot. Like, if you read a book and you like what that company is come up with, send them an email and say, hey, do you need any help with project management? The answer could be no, but it probably will be yes.
Along those lines, I think the best advice I can give to somebody who wants to get into project management is, like, do a small project where you're managing yourself and one other person. Make it like a super tiny game, whatever. But project management ultimately is about shipping the work. So, like, if I am interviewing us, or, if I'm looking for a project manager, I want to see what you've done. I want to see what you've completed. Even if you've only managed 1 or 2 or 3 people, if you can demonstrate to me that you managed people, that's going to go a long way in making me believe you can manage the people I need you to.
I really like the idea that you're absolutely right. There are lots of people who want to do the creative parts of this, and very few people who have a strong interest in talking to printers and figuring out quotes and, managing the project and all of those sort of essential back-end processes. And like Sophie says, I'm always looking at people and looking at the way that they work on other things and thinking that's somebody that knows their stuff. It's a much more rare thing to find. And if you make yourself known as someone who's interested in that work, then you'll find a place.
I would add one note, I think that's valid for Evil Hat and some other companies, but I can't tell which, but certainly at Evil Hat, we keep track of people like that, particularly if they have one or more marginalized identities. We're trying to bring more voices that have more difficulty getting heard. So if you this is your case, and because of that you're hesitating, certainly for Evil Hat, that's a plus rather than a minus. You still have to to do the work, to show your work, but we're happy to look at your work.
Someone in chat asked if you had the resources to bring someone on board to help you with your project management. If you're that overworked PM and you need some help, what's one task that you would 100% offload? Like the kind of work that you never have time for, or that you don't like, that you would like to have someone else do?
Well, as somebody who has done this, I offloaded all of my contract work. So I approve everybody, but I'm not the one that has to write up the contracts, make sure everybody gets signed, and hound everybody and all that stuff. But when everything is done, I give the final, yes, I am okay with this person being on the project. But contracts, oh my God, that's like the worst part of the whole thing. Not the discussion of projects or money or anything like that. Just people don't want to sign things. It's annoying. Like, sign the damn contract, people, and then send it back so you can be on the project. It's like, that's not that hard. So I was just like, as soon as somebody on my team was just like, I could probably do, yes. Yeah. Can you you do that then? I don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah. Communication, hounding people who are late and not responding, and I have the shame of having to say that when dealing with that, then I become unresponsive. So yeah, it kind of burns you out.
Having to be the tough person, right? The person chasing people down and asking them for work, that can be a real drain.
Exactly. I want to be the fun parent. I don't want to. I don't want to. I don't want to be the one with all the rules that you have to go. Ooh, I don't want to be a dad's. You know, that sort of thing.
All right, everybody. I think that's all the time we have for today. Obviously, if you have more questions that we haven't addressed, or if new things come up, take them to the Discord chat. There'll be lots of opportunities to talk more about it there. For now, I'd like to invite the three of you to tell us more about where people can find you and your work, and what's new, what you're working on now. Eloy, you want to start?
Yeah, I can totally start. Well, I mean, I'm working on many things per usual. But you can check out our Twitters at Third Eye Games, Facebook Third Eye Games. You can go thirdeyegames.net, though the website's wonky right now. We're doing a redo of the website right now. But essentially, we're doing lots of things over there. Working on new books for our game Part-Time Gods. We have 2 books right now that are currently like 60% done. They're in the works. My project manager will look at it and tell me how quickly we can get those done, which is me, of course. But no, we have those books coming out for that. We're working on a couple of books for the Ninja Crusade and Ampere 1 and tons of stuff. We always have pip system stuff coming out. I think probably the most exciting thing is that we just got, for New Agenda Publishing, we just got copies of ORUN in the warehouse this week. Like finally, it's taken months to get them from the printer. It's the most annoying process ever during a pandemic to try and get a printer to send you books. But we finally got those. So we're actually, we're looking into exactly how we're going to send them out, but that's going to happen very soon. But the books are gorgeous. Oh my God. And you know, on the side, I've been working on a couple of different projects. The most recent one is working on Into the Motherlands, which is shaping up to be really, really good. They just brought me on to do some mechanics work and trying to help them get a really awesome system for the game together. And so far, so good. I'm crossing my fingers, you know. So I mean, I always have my, you know, my fingers in a lot of different pies. So definitely type in Eloy Lasanta anywhere and you'll find me.
Sophie?
All my addresses are complicated, usually French words, because I'm old on the internet and I started when handles were, had to be obscure. So the easiest way is definitely to find me at Evil Hat, right to the info at Evil Hat for professional stuff, and I will be notified. But I have my personal blog at méchantanémonie at .wordpress.com. That's MECHANTEAMONE.wordpress.com. But you know, I've been neglecting my blog because I have so much work. And on Twitter, it's almost the same thing. It's Méchantanémone, MECHANTEANEMONE. So I apologize for that. But I'm not very interesting to find anyway. I don't have anything rigorous. I just write what goes through my head, usually about the last game I played. You should definitely follow Eloy, Steve, and Jen, because all their games are fantastic. I back all their Kickstarters, and Evil Hat. I also back Evil Hat Kickstarters for some reason.
Jen?
Yep, you can find me on Twitter at 10penjen, also 10penjen.com. I have a playset coming out with the next round of Fiasco expansion playsets that are coming in December. I also am the one that put all of the playsets into Roll20, so that's very exciting. And then I will just hand it off to Steve.
Yeah, we're super excited about these upcoming playsets to have Jen on board, and a number of other really great people. We're going to talk more about that later this week. Thank you all for joining us. I hope everybody else has a great rest of their Big Bad Online experience, and we'll see you in Discord.